All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 2, Episode 7 of HBO's Industry, entitled Lone Wolf and Cub. You know, I've been thinking about this title, and I can't quite place who's supposed to be the lone wolf and the cub here. Or if maybe this is just a play on maybe a fable that I'm unaware of. But, you know, when I look at this episode, my biggest takeaway, as far as the title is concerned anyway, is that, you know, I think Nicole here is the one that comes off like the lone wolf. She's a predator, very clearly. And she does seemingly operate alone, one-on-one with a lot of her victims. You know, and then the cubs can be looked at, cub in the singular here in the title, but I think the cub would be in this episode, it would be Venetia, but in each case, she shows a pattern with each of them. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but in specifics. But I think that's kind of where this episode title is going, and I think in a bigger picture, in a bit larger scheme of things, it's about the nature of the gender nature in the finance industry, because we see a lot of male dominance, particularly in this episode. And this is the one situation where it's flipped on its head, where Nicole is the dominant one. So I think this kind of speaks to just this nature of this gender battle that happens in the finance world. But talking about this episode, I think this show and this season, each episode has been better than the last. The show is just firing on all cylinders. This was an incredible episode. I had one issue here, and when I talk about that issue, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because there's a lot of great stuff to talk about here. But you know, it's one of those things that when you watch a show, take a show like Succession, which is this show is you can easily compare the two shows. You know, when I tell people about the show, I say it's like if Succession and Euphoria had a baby. Like the thing that I'm going to talk about the one issue that I had, it's those little things that stop this show, that keep this show just below the quality of something like a Succession. Every now and then, this show makes mistakes that a show like Succession would make. But like, it's one of those things where it's like you look at like a rookie in a sport. You know, you have a star rookie, but they still make what we call rookie mistakes. And you know, like once they tighten that up, they're gonna be unstoppable. I feel like this show is like that. Like, eliminate just a little bit of these things that I mean, who the fuck am I? You know, I deem them mistakes, but who the fuck am I? But tighten those things up, and I think you become a Succession type of show. But yeah, this was a great episode. There was a whole lot of events that took place that were important. It was incredibly exciting. I'm going to talk about one of the themes of this show, and in this episode is just escalation. Like, this show escalates things so well. I think it's the thing that this show does best, is putting you in an intense situation and you're like, holy shit, this is intense. And then the show goes, and we're going to make it worse. And this show is great at escalating. And there's a portion of this show, of this episode that I think where they did the escalation really, really well. So I'm going to tackle this kind of by character like I tend to do. We spend a lot of time with Gus, Yaz, Robert, and Harper. In the case of Harper, she was with Rishi and Eric for all of this episode. But I want to start with Gus because I think all of these storylines are starting to bleed into one another. And I think it's going to make for, I can't see how they fuck up this finale. Like, this finale looks like it's going to be just absolutely incredible. And they've done a great job of setting up all of the directions that these character storylines are going. So, like I said, I want to start with Gus. After Harper does call him trying to get insider trading information, just casually over her personal cell phone, which Gus is like, are you calling me from your regular phone? It reminded me of Pulp Fiction when Vincent calls, I can't remember his name, but a man who was supposed to be the one who his girl helped bring Uma Thurman's character back to life, and he's like, yeah, I'm about to bring an OD junkie over there. He's like, what phone are you calling me from? Wrong number. Like, that's kind of what Gus was doing here in this scene. But after he hangs up on Harper as a big favor to Harper, he then meets with Jesse. He's at Jesse's house at the time, and Jesse pays him for his tutoring job. And, he's like, Leo didn't even get into Oxford. And Jesse, being the mature person that he is, he's like, he may not have gotten into Oxford, but at the end of the day, he pays him $30,000 for essentially just helping improve not just Leo himself, but improve Leo's outlook on and relationship with Jesse. And there's value there. When it's as strange as these two kind of seemed at the beginning, for us to get to that point where Jesse left that show, right before he was supposed to go on, and being supportive of Leo, like to get to that place, and you look at Gus as the person who's responsible for it. Yeah, I think to Jesse, that's probably even more valuable than getting into Oxford. But at the end of the day, he would have preferred that he got into Oxford. And I love how he says, imagine how much it would have been if he got in. But there's a great moment in this scene, too, that I thought was good, where Gus kind of implies that Jesse is abusing his power. And Jesse says something like, you go talk about abusing power with me. Like, I paid you to tutor my son and you end up fucking him. And he says something like, do you think that sits well with me? And that's gotta be so intimidating to feel like you have a good relationship with somebody that powerful and know that you're, one, having sex with his son, but to hear him directly say to you, what you did does not sit well with me, that's gotta be really intimidating. But he gets paid the 30 grand for what he did with Leo, regardless of whether or not he got into Oxford. And then Gus goes and uses his political leverage with Aurora, who we can assume he took the promotion. He uses his political leverage in Aurora's name to essentially, I don't know. It's not blackmail, really. I think it's almost kind of like a bribe or like a dirty under the table handshake agreement. You scratch my back, I scratch yours agreement with this professor. And this professor, it sounded to me like what I gleaned from the conversation is that this professor is going to use his relationship with somebody who has an incoming student and encourage that student to take a year off and then use that spot for Leo. And this feels really shady to me, and I think there's some irony here in Gus taking the moral high road with Harper, but then doing this to help get Leo into Oxford. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to see going forward. Is this going to kind of turn us back into the Gus we saw from season 1 that feels kind of like a slime ball? The guy says, like, you always seem well suited for politics, and Gus seems proud of himself, and that sounds like like I would take that as an insult almost. But I think this season is kind of underutilized Gus, but I think that when they bring Gus in, it works, and I like the path that the Gus storyline seems to be going on, particularly if in season 3 Leo does get into Oxford and we can maintain, something of a relationship between him, Jesse, and Leo. That could be pretty interesting. So good stuff with Gus this week. Speaking of good stuff, let's talk about bad stuff. Like Yasmin is fucking terrible. This heel turn by her is absolutely remarkable. So we see her, she's at a party that is at her house she's not into, and she hits Maxim with you up with the you up text, and Maxim comes over. They're doing coke. They're talking about the meeting that Yaz had with. Actually, calling it a meeting is very generous. The ambush that Yaz did with Teresa, the nanny that her father impregnated in Berlin, and Maxim was just like, "Yeah, it's a bad idea." I think we're gonna see. I don't know if they're gonna maybe push this to season 3, but I'm interested to see the fallout from Yaz's father's infidelity. I feel like that's an interesting angle to work, and how that's going to impact their relationship and how that impacts who Yaz is. But Maxim starts to get a little handsy. Yaz isn't really into it. He gets super aggressive, and they play this up very much as like she was starting to fight off a sexual assault, which again, this is a theme here in this episode. The positioning of power as it pertains to sexuality and your power within the industry. People using their power for sex, which we see on this show, and then the male dominated dynamic, we see it play here. And this is just another example. They play the she was stopping a potential sexual assault. They play it that way, and I'm curious what the plan is with that, because is this kind of just further evidence to throw on the pile of what I'm saying? Like, hey, men in the finance world are all kinds of shitty. Like, is this just more evidence to throw on that pile? Or is this going to be something where they're actually going to take this in a Yaz was affected by this situation long term? I think that we kind of see how Yaz is affected by this in a later scene, which I'm about to talk about. But I'm wondering if this is kind of meant to be a long term play, or just kind of just more evidence to throw onto kind of like the theme of this episode. Or that one of the themes of this episode. But Venetia comes to Yaz to talk about a situation that she has with Nicole that I'm going to talk about in greater depth when I talk about Robert. And this is the one moment where I said that, like, this is the mistake that I think this show made that a show like Succession doesn't make. And they have Yaz essentially give Venetia, I can't even say essentially, she almost verbatim gives Venetia the same advice that was given to her with the situation with Kenny in season 1. And the fact that the language was virtually identical, I think, is what bothered me the most. It's kind of like, this is a show that treats you as a viewer with respect like 99% of the time. But even before they got to Yaz literally using the same language that was used on her, before they even got to that, I'm already making the connections. As a smart viewer, I'm sitting here like, okay, Yaz is doing the same thing to Venetia that was done to her, which has been a theme throughout the season. Yaz, instead of fighting back against this male-dominated industry, she kind of then turns that on to other people. And to me, and this is me speaking personally, I think that is a great sign of weakness to be abused and then go, now I'm going to be the abuser. And I think, of course, there's a little bit of like a subconscious thing there. Like, I don't think that she's, purposely thinking that. But to have that happen to you and to have things play out the way they played and learn jack shit from it and then turn around and do it to someone else, and then that person isn't as weak as you are and they stand up for themselves, that's got to be damaging to Yaz's self-confidence. But yeah, I didn't like the fact that the fact that she gave the same advice I was fine with, because again, I'm looking at this conceptually. I'm like, well, hurt people. This happened to Yaz, now she's doing it to Venetia, that makes sense. But when she starts literally like using the same language with Venetia that was used with her, I'm like, okay, I already got the fucking point. You didn't have to just like, put up the big neon sign that says she's doing the same shit. Like, okay, I get it. And that's something like using the exact same language, that's something that Succession wouldn't have done. And again, yeah, obviously I'm nitpicking here. And you guys have been listening to me. I think the show is incredible. I think very highly of it. But little things like that, they need to stop doing. Because this isn't the first time that I've complained about little things like that. But that's the only moment that kind of bothered me. Kenny then later runs into her in the elevator, and it gets a little awkward when he starts getting into his whole redemption song thing. And he invites her to one of his AA meetings, and she seems kind of okay with it. But the heel turn is completed for Yaz later in the episode when Kenny confronts her about the shitty advice that she gave to Venetia, and then she turns around and snaps it on him, calls him a cunt, calls him weak, all this kind of stuff. And the thing is, Yaz is terrible on this scene. Yeah, well, Yaz is terrible. You don't even need to add this scene. You just throw a period on there. Yaz is terrible. But I think what makes this scene, and I think what makes this show good, is the ability to add a little bit of nuance to this scene. Because yes, Yaz is terrible for shitting on Kenny, but at the end of the day, it is why, like, anybody other than Kenny should have come to her with that. Because you can't come to her with this kind of like moral high ground. Even though he's tried to repent and do all this stuff, at the end of the day, he did what he did, and then he's trying to come around and chastise her for doing the same thing. And she already is not really coming around on him. So for that to be him, it was bound to happen that way. But then you look at Kenny, and that's the responsibility that he carries now. And I think that's what makes Kenny interesting, and this situation interesting as well, because Kenny could have maybe said, went to maybe DVD and had DVD talk to Yaz, or anybody else talk to Yaz. He could have went to Adler. But he looked at this as like, as part of his recovery, it's his responsibility to watch over people and make sure that these sorts of things don't happen, and just to be a better person. So with him being the person who's in charge there, he looked at that as his duty and his responsibility as both a Pierpoint employee and as somebody who Venetia likely looks up to speak to Yaz himself. And it was going to end that way the whole time, but the way he meekly apologizes at the end, I felt bad for him. I'm like, this guy is getting shit on left and right, and all he's doing is like, yes, give me more. It's sad, but Yaz is absolutely terrible. And I wonder if they're like, I talk about this show in escalation. I wonder if this is going to be like a season-long escalation where it's like, I'm already fully on like, fuck yeah, she's fucking terrible. Like she's not good. She's not cut out for this job. She's nothing more than a sex object to her clients. She doesn't know how to be decent toward people. She treats Kenny like shit. Like, I'm already sold on fuck yes. And I still feel like this show is going to find a way to make her even worse in the finale. I'm sure of it. So I need to speed this up because we haven't even gotten to Harper and Eric and Rishi yet. So moving on to Robert, he's out with Nicole. They're not having a good dinner, and Venetia pops up. And just like Donald Trump, she makes a move on Nicole like a bitch. She, kind of fangirls out. They start connecting over, her knowledge of Nicole's past, which obviously Robert wouldn't have any idea on because he's not good at his job aside from being somebody who's great to go out and have drinks with, which he's not doing anymore. But we see Venetia kind of like make this move, and it comes off kind of initially as like a chance, kind of just like, hey, there's two people I know, let me go sit down and be cool with them. And then when Robert starts to leave, it's very much like, yeah, you can go ahead. And it felt very calculated, a very calculated move by Venetia. Like, she was coming in there with ill intent. But then we also have the other dynamic at play here, which is now the formulation of a pattern for Nicole. This pattern of like, somebody comes up to her, somebody approaches her, she kind of downplays it, like, I don't know if I'm really into you. And then, as the person continues to talk, she warms up to that person, and then before you know it, hands on the genitals. So like, that's Nicole's pattern. So Venetia comes up, and Robert decides that he's completely pushed out of this conversation. Nicole's talking to him, wow, disrespectful, and he decides he's gonna leave. And as soon as Robert leaves, I'm thinking like, oh man, like this might not go well for Venetia. And then as I'm thinking that, you could see him making the connection in his head right before he gets on the motorcycle. I'm like, yeah, you know it's gonna go down. And then he goes back in there and they're gone. And he tries to call, no answer. And just as the pattern shows, what happens. And and Nicole does make the move. And Venetia tries to, she tells Kenny about it after the aforementioned shitty advice she got from Yas. And then Kenny tells DVD, and DVD and Kenny kind of question Robert about it. He lies terribly about it, which I didn't even understand his motivation for not being open, unless just aside from his own embarrassment about his involvement or lack of. But he lies about it, and he seemingly, I guess, is okay with that. I love what they do with Robert in that he's a guy who is dumb. He makes mistakes, but he's well-intentioned, so he tries to fix them. So, like, he knows that leaving was a mistake. He goes back in there and tries to fix it, but they're gone. He lies about what happened, and then Venetia comes down there outside while he's smoking and checks him like, I know that you knew this was going to happen just based on the rapport that you two had. Not even say rapport anymore, but like the level of comfort that you had in speaking to her the way you spoke to her and the way you two speak to each other. And then the concerned voice notes that you left me. And then again, Robert's like, he has to tell the truth. And he does that. And he goes and tells DVD the truth about what actually happened. So I love that Robert is, to me, such an interesting character because he's so complex in that he's he's well-intentioned at times, but he's just kind of dumb and he makes bad decisions. But he's a guy that is constantly fighting to not live up to what is expected of him. And what, when I put it like that, it sounds like good things are expected of him, but he's expected to be terrible. And he kind of is somebody who, if he relaxed, he would be terrible, but he's trying to fight against that. And I find Robert to be an incredibly compelling character because you think one moment you're like, what a fuck up. And then the next moment you're like, damn, he means well, but he just doesn't know what he's doing. But I think this whole situation was a good example of what I said about how this show likes to escalate. Like, okay, so you have Venetia makes the move on Nicole that at the dinner. That makes the move professionally, not that way, but makes the move on Nicole at this dinner. That alone, especially when you could tell it was kind of like a move on Robert as well, in a I'm gonna step on his toes kind of way, that was already kind of a pretty big deal to me. Like, that was an event. But then you have the escalation of Robert leaving, and you're like, oh shit, he's leaving her alone. Oh, is Nicole gonna try to do something? And you're like, yeah, that she might end up getting assaulted. Rob tries to do the right thing and goes back, and then we escalate again because it's like, oh, now they're gone. You're like, oh, now you know this is about to happen. Then we escalate some more when finding out that she did indeed get assaulted. Because of course, before that, you're like, okay, well, yeah, Nicole might try to do her thing, but you don't know. And then we escalate again by finding out that she did get assaulted. So it's like, oh man, we continue to escalate. Like, man, this actually went down. And then they're like, you thought we were done escalating? We're not done escalating. Because they escalate even more when Venetia accuses Robert of knowing what happened, and they escalate again when he tells DVD, and they escalated again when he pulls Harper into it, saying like, yeah, this happened to Harper too, so it's a pattern. And they escalated it again when DVD goes to tell Adler, and Adler's just like, yeah, fucking bury it. I don't have time for these HR problems. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that. So like I said, when we talk about how good this show escalates things, like to go from an already wild situation to get to the point where Adler's being told that there's a pattern of sexual abuse from one of their clients, and he's just like, yeah, just don't do anything until it goes away. Like, the escalation here is astounding. And then you end up with DVD crying in the bathroom over it, like, off the charts. But that's one of the things I love about this show. One of the other things I love about this show takes place during the Harper, Eric, and Rishi storyline. So that's where I'm going to go, and then that's going to be it for this week. But so we open up the episode with this storyline. We see Harper and Eric at Pier Point in the middle of the night, and Eric's coaching her on how to be a criminal. Like, you can't take the papers, so take all the pictures that you can. You're going to send it to me through WhatsApp. It's going to be encrypted. Like, he's got all this shit planned out. And Rishi shows up, and he's mad that Harper's there, and then Eric is like, you're only here because Harper insisted that you be. And I think that's good because at the end of the day, I kind of enjoy the way Harper and Rishi go back at one another, but you could tell that they got the respect there, and she flat out says that. And then I love that he has a line. He says something like, you know, the way that you turn on a dime is sociopathic. And it's so true. It's so true. And I love that line from Rishi. Has a lot of great lines in this episode. He's one of those guys that's obnoxious, but you kind of like his role within this show because he brings something different from all the other characters. I also loved when he came in and Eric asked him why he was dressed like Kendall Roy. Like, that's a super kind of like that's as much as you could get the breaking the fourth wall without breaking. Like, you completely break the fact this is even a TV show by referencing another HBO property. Like, I just thought that was really funny. But all right, so now it's time to break down what happened here. And I'm sure you guys probably followed it, but in case you didn't, I'm gonna let you know what happened. So I have it written down here because, again, I'm no finance expert, but you know, it takes me, like, with this show and with Succession, it takes me like half an hour to get my notes together because everything is so complex and there's so many things that I want to talk about, so many things that these shows do that kind of lie beneath the surface that aren't obvious, and just getting these notes together in ways that when I start to record, it can flow in a good and natural way. I want to kind of, I'm not going to read directly from my notes, but I just want to make sure I lay this out in a step-by-step, here's what happened way, so that you guys can be clear on everything that happened, just how big of a deal it was, and just how fucked they're probably going to end up in the next episode when Harper's plan inevitably does not go as she would like. So the plan starts off with Eric having an in with this bank, and they use code names here that kind of represent the countries. They have an American bank, which is the one that Eric seems to have an in with, and he only wants to meet with that bank. He's like, we're good with them. He calls them Yankees. We're good with them. Let's not even bother with anyone else. Harper and Rishi want to have a backup plan, which makes perfect sense. And they want to talk to a German bank with the code name Reichstag. So that's what they want to do. They want to set that meeting up. And then referenced in a little bit, there's a Japanese bank that they refer to as Shogun as well. So like I said, Eric only wants to meet with Yankees. Harper and Rishi want the backup. Also want to meet with Reichstag as a backup. Things are going great at the Reichstag meeting. Harper and Rishi are kind of like bouncing back and forth off of each other. Everything's going smooth. They look like superstars. They're guaranteeing that they got Jesse with them, which, as we know, is not true because Harper can't even get in touch with Jesse right now. So they're technically selling themselves with something they don't literally have. And I don't believe Eric or Rishi know that they don't technically have Jesse. So they're doing all that until the people that they're talking to talk to Eric, and Eric just starts berating them and insulting them about how they're too good to work there and that they'd be doing them a favor by working there. And ultimately, it doesn't work out. And I think that I love how we are meant to glean this without it directly being said, but we are meant to, well, Rishi does hint at it, but we are meant to glean from that Eric purposely sabotaged that meeting so that the Yankee bank was the only option that they were going to have, the one that he wanted. So then we have the meeting with the Yankees bank. It's going well again until someone shows up late to the meeting, and it is fucking Daria. If you guys remember, I'm not going to go into specifics, but Daria was the person who worked on the desk with Harper and Eric for all of season 1 until she was thrown under the bus by Harper to get Eric back into the company. So Daria obviously is going to have a lot of discontentment. She's going to fucking hate Harper and Eric, and she's there at the bank and at the Yankees bank. And then even, this is what I love is, again, escalation. The fact that Daria walks in and that she works there is super fucking escalation to start with. But once Daria's there, we learn a lot of important things that escalate this even further and really make the failure of the Yankees meeting fucking epic. So I'm going to write down what we learned here. So, one, we learned that Daria has Jesse's ear as well, which confirms for us that Jesse does have more than one Harper. I think DVD said that to her in the last episode or 2 episodes ago. Like, he probably has more than one like you. She's like, nah. Well, apparently he does, and he's still talking to this one. But kind of like point 1B of that is that, well, I already mentioned, I was going to say that it's, 1B is the fact that she has Jesse and Harper's been lying about having Jesse, but I already kind of touched on that. So point 2 that happened that we learned here is that Jesse hasn't backed out of his fast age short as expected, which Harper then gleans to mean that he is at least still considering her proposal that she proposed before he was supposed to go on that show and didn't. So she feels like even though he's not talking to her, she still has his ear to some degree. So she learned that from Daria being present in that meeting. And then the third really important thing that we learned here is that the meeting itself wasn't even done on good terms, on good faith. This was a setup by Yankees. They're trying to court a CPS desk from Shogun, and Pierpoint showing up there just makes them look better by, just like, hey, look how great we are. You should come here. We got Pierpoint motherfuckers trying to work here. And so they really just set this up as a means to kind of like woo these people from Shogun. So I think the one guy says like, just you guys being here actually works out really well for us. And this is after we already find out that Daria's got Jesse and all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. But yeah, so they used our team. And one guy even remarks, he's like, Eric, if this was the other way around, you'd be impressed. And it's true, he would be. But that's why I love this scene, though. I love that we all collectively had the rug pulled out from under us. Us as the viewers and Eric, Harper, and Rishi. We all had the rug pulled out from under us at the same time. And it was epic. I'm just like, oh my God, this is getting worse and worse and worse. This is so bad. This is so bad. And like I said, word of the day, escalation. You think you might be done with the escalating, but no. They go to this bar, they're day drinking, and Rishi's just like, yeah, I'm just going to go back to the office and keep my head down. And Eric's like, no. You don't understand how fucked we are now. Like, word is going to get out that we were having these meetings. No one's going to want to talk to us anymore. We can't be trusted. We're going to look desperate if we try to call people. Like, he doesn't say it directly, but he basically implies they are completely out of jobs. Like, they are totally and completely fucked. But then Harper pulls one last trick out of her bag. She takes a call from DVD, who's, like I mentioned earlier, he was crying in the bathroom over what happened with Adler and him realizing about the whole culture of disrespect toward women is an understatement. Complete and total mistreatment and abuse of women. The pattern and the system within this industry, well, within Pierpoint, is so disgusting to him that he's crying in the bathroom stall. And Harper uses this conversation as a means to get DVD to show up at the bar. And essentially, they sell DVD on the idea of also leaving Pierpoint and joining them. So DVD shows up at the bar, and essentially they convince DVD to leave Pierpoint and join with them. And he's going to use his leverage with the people at Shogun to get all 4 of them in. And it's essentially where they land at. But they convince him through a number of ways. One, what we just saw, he gets out of the sexist, misogynistic culture at Pierpoint, which, we just saw him crying over that. That's a big deal to him. That's how they set that up. They had him, do the right thing, take this thing all the way up to Adler. Adler essentially tells him to fuck off, and now it's like, okay, now they've set up a situation where getting out of Pierpoint is motivational to him. Is a good reason. Two, he's gonna be in charge. He lays out his terms. They're gonna report to him. He makes his demands, and he gets to have what he gets to have what he wants. And then three, he also gets the potential upward mobility there, because they set this up as well. When he's having this conversation with Adler, he mentions offhand that he didn't get a promotion that he was promised. So now they can look at it like, Shogun's been headhunting him, according to him. He can get them all in over there, and then now he has the potential to actually get the promotions that he's promised, instead of getting promised promotions and not getting them. So everything works out perfectly. Harper lays out a really good case for DVD to leave and join them. He thinks about it, says he's gonna make some calls, and it looks like it's in. But I mean, I don't. There's no way this is gonna go off without a hitch, right? I mean, what kind of finale would we have if industry wrapped everything up in a neat little package the way it should be? Like, no, this is gonna go left somehow, and I'm wondering if it's gonna be DVD betraying them somehow. That's kind of my guess. They've really leaned into this idea of DVD being a good guy, and that played when he was crying over the Venetia situation and Adler and all that. So it does play up that he's actually a good guy. The whole thing of like, how'd you get this far and being a nice guy? But then, he did meet a ceiling. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they're going to play it straight, but something's going to go wrong. And then I love how they close the episode with a great line from Eric. He said, "Isn't it lucky that no one is ever satisfied?" What a great line. And he laughs, and that's it. So, like I said, great episode. I had the one little issue with Yaz, but man, they're wrapping up these storylines in a great way. I'm super excited for the finale to see what happens. And yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Let's talk about it, and I will see you guys next week for the finale. Until then, peace.